A couple of days ago, I was listening to a recording from a spiritual teacher named Saryan, and he was talking about how as you open your heart, more and more, you naturally begin to care more about the affairs of the world. And for me, I've like when I was young, I wanted to be an ambassador. Like when I was in middle school. Um, yeah, and as I got older, I was like just saw how corrupt the government was and just knew my personality and just felt like that is not the way I want to go. Um, and and also I felt like part of it was that I didn't feel patriotic. I felt like, yeah, I didn't really have a feeling of like I want to save this country. I just had a lot more blame around it, even though I know I was blessed to grow up here and I feel lucky and appreciate many things about it. I didn't feel a natural like emotional drive, um, an emotional attachment that would be necessary. I felt like to drive me to want to deal with all the bullshit that you'd have to deal with if you got into politics in this country. So when I moved to Korea after college, I remember wondering if that feeling would maybe come up in Korea, because even though I'm much more American than Korean in a lot of ways, I've always had this like deep connection with my ancestry. So yeah, but when I was there, I really just felt like it's just another government. It's actually very similar to the States. It's very corrupt. It's all around money. And but I remember one of the issues that really spoke to me was this idea of these Korean sex slaves. They had been kidnapped or taken as sex slaves for the Japanese, and they're all like old now, like 80s or 90s, in their 80s or 90s, and they've been fighting their whole life to receive some recognition or apology from the Japanese government, and they just hadn't been able to receive it. And so I would be in Seoul and sometimes like see these like small, I wouldn't even call it a riot, it's just like a couple women with their signs, and I would just feel so much for that. But again, kind of like, what am I going to do about that? Like, do I really want to devote my life to supporting these women? I mean, I just didn't have that in me. I felt like I was too selfish. I just didn't have a drive to do that. But it always stuck with me. And then of course, the whole North Korea, South Korea divide. I mean, that's a huge thing. My grandmother, had family. She was part of the thing that got split with her family. She doesn't know if some people are alive or dead. I mean, that's been a huge thing that I've always kind of felt something about. But again, it felt too big to do anything. So for some reason, that's what naturally came to my mind as I'm listening to this recording, and all that in a span of like 2 seconds, right? And the next thing this guy Saryan says after talking about being open to the world, and mind you, this is a white guy from, he lives in Utah. I don't know where he's from, but he suddenly says, "Yeah, I want to share with you guys a personal vision I had." And he starts talking about how he saw himself being invited to North Korea, and that the North Korean government had like invited just a handful of Westerners as kind of like an illusion, like a to appease the people in the world and make it seem like they were opening up to Western ideas, or just, being friendly. But that Saryan came in, and in the 5 minutes that it was allotted to him, he actually shared this like vibration of oneness that changed the whole nation, right? It's like it was a frequency, a vibration, and he said he felt like he was like part of a Trojan horse. It's like they came in, thinking that this small group would just be kind of like performing, just like doing some speech or some small talk that would never really have an effect on anything. It was just for show. But that actually ended up, using the opportunity to actually change something. And as he's talking, I'm just getting like chills all over my body. And it hit me that, you know, I am an ambassador, and it's not going to be through the government. And these symbols that keep coming in around, like in my painting, I keep seeing like foxes and uh, octopus and the stingray, and it's all about, and bats, and it's all about camouflage, the ability to know when to be seen and know when to become invisible, and to be able to be completely present while not drawing attention to oneself. And I had trouble with that at first because I was like, I thought this whole thing was about like standing in my power and not hiding. But I see it just made sense all of a sudden that it's like, again, using art and using performance to bypass not just people's limited mindsets, but governments. Like, if you don't look like a threat, but you actually are coming in with like as a channel of this energy that can transform the world, then that's way more effective than coming in as like, you know, a piece of propaganda. So that I am helping to, as I help myself, right, let go of like limiting ideas and the programming, social programming, but that for me, the crux of it is around sexuality, because I see sexuality as the distortion of sexuality as the root of our ideas of scarcity, because the way that we have been taught, or and the way it's been handed down, this idea of if to have a mate, you need to compete for it, you need to be the best, you need to be chosen, and then you need to be to tame the person or keep them somehow, in order to stay secure. All of that just is completely, antithetical to the idea of, we're all one, and that we're all free, and that no one's special because everyone is special. And so as I've been just accepting that more, that like my interests, and I've always been interested in sex, and I've always had some focus around it because of the way that people react to me sexually, and also my own sexual inclinations, and just so many challenges around just relating to people, and how it gets confused because of sexuality, and then beyond sex as a physical act, I'm talking about the sexuality in terms of the way it plays in our gender identity, and how we are still enslaved, everywhere, around ideas of like, I'm a woman, so this means this, or I'm a man and that means that. And it doesn't matter if our society seems liberated. There are ancestral patterns that live in our bodies that prevent us from, like how many women still don't feel comfortable just having time to themselves. No matter how much they do for others, still feel guilty or don't give themselves enough time. Things like that. Something very simple, but it's like pervasive, and it's still around, even in a country like ours where women have, so much freedom in some ways. So I'm thinking of this show, and to me, this show that's coming up is about this kind of not being reflected for who you really are, and waking up to that, waking up to seeing your true value, and how all the suffering that you have experienced has shaped you and is actually beautiful. And then I was going to bring in, I'm going to kind of give that message creatively through story. And then I was going to bring in like the narrative of like my family, and things that have played out, and yeah, a cousin of mine was murdered, and I saw how her death was related to um, actions that had gone on in my family, way before. Um, and then I saw how that was connected to, ancestral patterns of humankind. And it has to do with this unconsciousness around the power of women and this gender inequality, or this fight, this this illusion of this need to compete or fight between not just men and women, but between women and women, and all of that. So it just hit me that, wait, these sex slaves, this is this is part of the story too. They're like on one end of the continuum, It's like, I mean, yeah, this it's just such a massive, it's just such a massive topic, because it's the root of all scarcity thinking. It's the root, this distorted, the enslavement of our minds and our bodies because of these old ideas of sexuality is the root of, us feeling unworthy, feeling like we have to prove ourselves, and the insecurity around intimacy, and things like sex slaves, and women being raped and murdered. And so I just realized that, like, I'm all of that wants to be expressed through me, and that, of course, I would be the one to do it. Like I feel like my whole life has prepared me for this. Like, the things I've been interested in since I was young, like, it's all here. And the day that I realized that, I thought, my parents are Korean, so it's something I could actually talk to them about, and maybe they could help me, because I realized, my parents, my mom especially, is so worried about me because she just thinks my work is so out there, and she just, she wants me to she wants to make sure that I'm, like, gonna make it, in society, and be accepted, and married and all of that. So I see her fear, and she said before to me, like, if you were doing something that I could understand, then, maybe I could help you, because, like, my parents would want to help me if I tried to go to school again, or if I opened up a normal business, like, they would probably try to help me. But she's like, I just don't know what to do, and I feel like I'm sometimes being a bad mom for, like, not being more adamant about trying to stop you. And I'm like, don't ever think that. First of all, no matter what you did, you couldn't stop me. But no, you're being a great mom, and but I understand your fear. Just don't feel responsible. But I'm very confident, so I'm like, you'll see. And I wish you would. I mean, I've been saying that for a while, and part of me wishes that she could see sooner, but it'll happen when it happens. And anyway, so she I felt like, oh, this is a way that she could, like, feel me, and maybe help me. And so I just said, hey mom, those like Korean grandmothers or whatever who were used by the Japanese. And before I even finished my sentence, she said this phrase in Korean, which I didn't know, but it refers to those women of that time. And she said, oh yeah, I was actually going to meet the head of that association, a head of the association that supports those women, tonight for dinner. And I was like, what? And she said last week she had met this woman in Arizona,